But it is not over yet, ladies and gentlemen. Coming up next is a panel discussion. At this panel, we will have 5 guest industry-leading technology and digital leaders who will be sharing their success stories and challenges in their journey of engineering an X factor for their businesses. Our first guest panelist has been in PETRONAS for 22 years and is currently the head of digital under PETRONAS Downstream business. In his capacity, Shah Razalli has led the creation of digital and innovation solutions in growing value for the business. Our second guest panelist leads the online marketing campaigns and marketing intelligence teams at Shopee Malaysia. Weng is responsible for conceptualizing and driving strategies to build continuous brand awareness, customer engagement, and customer loyalty across the Shopee platform. Our third guest panelist was named by IDG in November 2019 as one of ASEAN's 50 most innovative technology leaders. As the Group Chief Technology Officer, Kang oversees Star Media Group's overall strategies and initiatives related to technology and focuses on digital transformation across the group. In a previous employment, Jin was the CITO for Hong Leong Bank. Our fourth guest panelist brings more than 25 years of technology industry leadership, business consulting expertise, and executive management experience. Rajoo heads the Tata Consultancy services in Malaysia. Under Jeevan's leadership, TCS has increased market share and revenue to become the top 5 consulting companies in Malaysia with close to 1,000 consultants working across Malaysian projects. Jeevan pioneered a policy of agile at the workplace, interacting with the project delivery consultants to have a pulse on all implemented projects. Lastly but not least, our panel moderator, Duncan is a senior research manager with IDC ASEAN. And he has more than 12 years of working experience in the telecommunications and services industry. In his role, Duncan is involved in leading services-driven consulting projects for the sub-region, providing advisory services to leading technology vendors in winning markets, partnership strategies, and technology adoption in ASEAN. This is definitely a power-packed panel. If you're excited, let us know in the comment section below. And before I hand it over to Duncan, just a gentle reminder that if you have any questions for our panel, please also type it in the chat box or in the comment section below if you're on Facebook or on YouTube. All right, so the panel is getting ready. We will be back in just a short while, so please stay tuned.
Hello, good morning everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the CXO 2020 Summit. My name is Duncan Tan. I am a Senior Research Manager at IDC, and I will be your moderator today. And the topic of our panel discussion today is realizing your future enterprise. And I'm joined by these 4 very handsome gentlemen here today, and we will be talking to them and having them share the stories of their success stories on the digital journey and also the challenges that they have faced and embarking this. And they also would like to share how do you engineer the X factor to your businesses moving forward. Before we begin, let me quickly introduce the panel that we have today. So on my far right, we have Shah Razalli, Head of Downstream Digital at PETRONAS, Mr. Weng, Marketing Lead at Shopee, Mr. Kang, Group Chief Technology Officer at Star Media Group, and Mr. Jeevan Rajoo, Country Head for Tata Consulting Services. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today.
Morning.
So,
morning.
I want to start by discussing on the overall landscape, right? That how has embarking on the digital journey be successful to your organization and how it has actually helped your organization navigate through this pandemic? And I wanted to start with number 1 from Weng was that Shopee being a digital native organization themselves and one that runs on digital platform itself, how has it been like for an organization like you to navigate through the digital journey, and also how has the pandemic impacted you?
Sure, thanks for the question. So I think Shopee as an organization is an organization that, as you said, is digital, right? So we didn't have too much trouble into integrating the digital because that's what we are, right? But I think above and beyond that, I think as we are a digital organization first, we make sure that all of our teams also stay relevant in this space. And just to give you an example, when the MCO happened, we actually did our first virtual press conference from our own homes. And that's because actually our live streaming teams and event teams could quickly pivot because they were already in the same mindset. But I think to your question, above and beyond that, Shopee really is an ecosystem of things, right? We are not a company that sits alone. So we do actually have sellers and stuff who are offline, who are part of the ecosystem, who impact the business. And so as part of this, we've actually been working very hard since the MCO happened to really increase the knowledge and learning on that. And we have like things like Shopee Uni and we have all these initiatives to help people get online.
Okay, then I'm going to ask a very obvious question was that, did you see an increase in terms of the online transaction for Shopee during the lockdown and the MCO?
Yes, people have shifted their spend online during that period because that was they had no choice but to do it. Yeah, so we did see an increase. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question would be for two organizations or two businesses that has deeper roots in more conventional, I would say conventional verticals, which is the oil and gas and also the media company, right? So I want to start with Eugene first, was that The Star has came a long way from being a publication company that started in Penang and even right now, even hosting us today in this virtual event, and also even launching your Dim Sum app, which is a video streaming application, right? Could you share with us what was the digital journey like? What was the end game in mind that Star Media Group had, and what has the impact of the pandemic been for the organization?
Okay, good morning everyone. So that sounded like 2 or 3 different questions. So I will start, so our digital journey started quite early, but I think sometime in 2018, we did a stock take in terms of where we were. So this was way before the pandemic. So when we did a stock take, we realized that we had quite a number of digital assets, right? But we were all over the place. So we had many websites, many apps, but different technologies. We were tracking cookies, right? But we were using different technologies. So we didn't know if somebody went to the Star Online and then that person went over to Kuali.com. We didn't know it was the same person, right? So we did a lot of, I guess, now I can say it, it was quite silly then, right? So the first things we got to do was we had to get our basics right. So we had to unify our technologies. We had to make sure that we had the same tracking technology so that we were able to at least build an ecosystem ourselves. And then secondly, another silly thing we did was some of our digital business comes from serving ads, and then we had like 2 or different ad servers. Can you imagine that, right? So that also we had to do some housekeeping. We had to make sure that we all go to the same ad. So I think in 2018, that was basically the foundation. We basically need to clean up shop just to make sure that our base is right. Not only from the ability to track customers, so that once we can track customers across our different sites, then we were able to serve them the right information and things like that. But also traditionally, so most of our traditional business was basically the newspaper. So we had journalists who would go out there and write articles, but then they had no choice. They had to come back to the office, upload, or go to Starbucks, and then so we also have our thestar.com.my, right? And then we realized that person would have to copy and paste articles from one system to another. So that was again another consolidation of technologies, right? So that now I think you can ask our journalists, they can be parking somewhere outside, uploading uploading articles, and that same article can be pushed to Twitter, Facebook. So that was basically what we have done. But in the pandemic, it was a different story. So in the pandemic, we realized that we had to pivot quite fast because some lines of business really had no more business. So we had an events business, we used to run events, so nobody was going to come to our events, right? So they had to very quickly pivot and become digital. So today is one example. Then we had another line of business is our Star Property. So they used to run fairs. We have a Star Education Fair also. So those suddenly also became became digital fairs. So so that's what we had to do during the pandemic. So the end game was to ensure that we have an ecosystem that is sustainable. Moving forward. That's basically simplistically putting it.
Okay, thank you for the sharing. And with that, I also wanted to tie that back to a lot of the sentiment that we feel that our lifestyle has changed because of the pandemic and all, right? And I wanted to tie this to my question to my next panelist is that one thing that has changed for me is that I'm actually traveling less, so that means that I'm using less fuel. So, Shah, could you share with us how has this impacted the downstream business for PETRONAS from an oil and gas perspective? And could you share with us some of the experience of yourself adopting the digital technology for PETRONAS himself?
Thanks, Duncan. For the downstream business of PETRONAS, we've adopted digital and innovation a few years ago already. And I think this is in the face of thinning margins brought about by some of the challenges that you mentioned earlier, as well as market disruptions. So we needed to rethink how can we operate our assets safer, more reliable, more efficient. How might we be able to then, deliver products through our supply chain in a more optimized cost to serve manner, and how might we be able to elevate the whole customer experience with our marketing entities so that we can retain and grow market share. So when we've deployed a few digital and innovation solutions throughout the years, and when COVID-19 struck, we were quite well positioned to handle that. A few examples that I can mention here is that through some of our manufacturing analytics solutions, we were able to remotely monitor and operate our plants with minimal manning at site, reliably, safely, and efficiently. Through some of the other proprietary digital solution that we created with my friend Jeevan here with TCS. The project is called DAF. It stands for Drive Optimization of Value Across the Enterprise. Essentially, what it is looking through the oil value chain and find ways for us to deliver the product in a most cost-efficient manner. Through that, we were able to deliver products in a very cost-efficient manner. Settle, I'm not sure whether you have Settle on your phones. We've launched Settle a couple of years back, and Settle capitalize on the whole digital relationships that we have with the customers, providing them seamless and contactless transactions throughout the lockdown period. Lastly, 90% of PETRONAS staff were, sent home, those that are not required at site. And I think with the collaborative tools that we already have, ranging from, video and collaboration tools to some of the business intelligence, do-it-yourself dashboards, all the way to shopping tools like Miro, Mural, and all that, we were quite positioned to manage the pandemic.
Thank you, Shah. And yes, I do have Settle on my phone.
Great.
Okay, my next question is for Jeevan, right? So the overall tone that we hear from the panelists themselves is that tech vendors themselves, right? Like for example, TCS, if I can use the abbreviation, is that they play a very important role in the success of the businesses moving forward, especially in the digital transformations phase and the digital journey. Even in IDC itself, a market research company, we do see that there's a strong tone that organizations are building a lot of resiliency in the recovery phase of this pandemic, right? Could you share with us how a technology vendor like TCS can actually help their clients in this digital transformation journey, and that how was it like supporting our clients during the pandemic, during the lockdown where everyone was apart, there was remote working, and could you share with us your thoughts on that?
Sure, Duncan. Firstly, I think it's a new way of living. I think all of us are experiencing across the world. Likewise, we've got 1,000 customers across the world, and we realized that when the lockdown came about, we literally had to mobilize close to 400,000 people, associate employees of TCS, into a secure, borderless, and workspace environment where they're able to provide support and services to our customers. So we had a massive task of getting what we call SBWS, Secure Borderless Workspace tool, and move that tool to all our employees, which is 450,000 people, and get them to make sure there is continuity of services to our customer. And with that, we wanted to make sure that no matter where you are as our customer, we wanted to make sure that you sure have service continuity. The way you have had it before, you should have the same service continuity. The second thing, we wanted to make sure your data that we have and we are managing is absolutely secure. And the security of data was paramount for us because it's customer data. Number third is the employee well-being, because they're now all working from home, comforts of home. We want to make sure the employee well-being is absolutely well taken care of. So these were the three premises that SBWS came about, and this is where we deployed all the tool to all our associates. And I think with that, we made sure there were no disruption of services to all our banking customers, to all our healthcare customers, to all our telco customers. Even in Malaysia, with all the GLC customers that we have, we're proud to say that we never had any service disruption. And that's the kind of continuity and resilience that we had to bring forth immediately, almost in the span of a week to 10 days.
Okay, thank you. And I remember when the lockdown news came about, most organizations were scrambling about in a matter of short period of time to actually mobilize their workforce. On the next section, I wanted to ask the panelists is in terms of, I understand just now there's a lot of success stories that we have discussed about, but then I wanted to ask, what would the challenges be? And I wanted to pose the first question to Eugene is that, as you mentioned just now, there were multiple ad platform that you had, and that requires some of, can I say, standardization and consolidation of your platforms. Could you share with us how did the pivot happen, and what were the challenges that the Star Media Group actually faced when embarking on the digital journey themselves?
Okay, so our challenges were actually quite basic, right? So the first thing we had to do was we had to make sure that we had the budgets for it. So we had to go to the board and ask for budget, right? Because you can't do things out of nothing. But the good thing is the board actually recognized that we needed to do something to transform. So yeah, so when I first joined the Star, the first couple of months was to make sure that we had the roadmap in place. Then we had to go and ask for budget and things like that. But once we had that all approved, then it was executing. But surprisingly, actually, technology, in my opinion, is really not the biggest challenge. So the biggest challenge is really an organizational change. That I think is, it may be mundane, it may be non-sexy, but it's quite important. So I'll give you an example. So for example, in the Star, the star.com.my used to be free, right? But nowadays I think recently put up a paywall. So, we encourage you to subscribe because we have to pay people like Myra, right, to work, right? So, if not, our journalists also need to cari makan, right? You can't give everything for free. And now our newspapers is only RM1.80. Actually, the cost is RM4, right? But just to let you know, we are subsidizing quite a lot. So we need to find a new revenue stream. So we decided to test the water with subscribing, right? But when the moment we put up the paywall or we encourage you to subscribe, there'll be people who don't want to subscribe. So and then we have to internally change ourselves. Like I mentioned, it's an organization issue. So how do you encourage people to come to the star.com.my and start reading or even pay to read? So you either need to change yourself, write more interesting articles. So now if you notice, if you go to star.com.my, there's a new tab called Star Plus, and we've started to introduce visual articles, right? So those were some things that took a bit of time to convince the business or the content people that, hey, you yourself need to pivot. You can't, it's not everything technology can solve. I mean, I give you all the best technology, but you got to attract somebody to come over to read the stuff so maybe you got to write better stuff, right? So that was, in my opinion, the biggest challenge. The technology, in my opinion, is really not, because technology is always an enabler.
Okay. Correct. Thank you. Maybe another thing to pivot is from Starbucks to Kopitiam, local Kopitiam, supporting our local businesses. Okay. Then, Shah, I wanted to ask, right, there has been a huge change in the downstream especially for the oil and gas, like, for example, issues that you face with aging process facilities, rising cost of energy, as what you mentioned, that the thinning of margins, and that there's a lack of skill for plant operators. Can you share with us, how has technology actually helped you there, and what are the challenges that you had when implementing this across, like, for example, PETRONAS, wide area of footprint that you have of the plants, the oil gases that you have. Could you share with us insights on that?
Sure, yeah. And over the past few years that we've done this, there are numerous challenges. Top of my mind, I could probably just rattle off three, the big ones that we significantly learned from. The first is, we have to move away from one-size-fits-all processes. From an energy industry, the typical vocabulary has always been final investment decisions based on certain scope, stage gates, and studies that takes months and execution that take years. We needed to pivot to languages that is more attuned to agile, sprints in weeks, fail fast and pivot even faster, and all that. And what we recognize is that the processes that we had will not fit. So we had to change some of the processes, and a couple of the processes that was of benefit from this transformation was procurement and HR. The second piece is around the whole notion of going into an innovation endeavor without having a certainty. being comfortable to deal with an ambiguous situation. We didn't know what data that we would need. We didn't know whether a particular user experience would be desirable until we go and test it with the customer. So we needed to be comfortable to pivot and move along the way to change the shape and form of the products. The last piece, and I think is equally important, is agile doesn't just apply to methodology or processes. It also applies to people. And in this sense, it's the whole relationship with the service providers, and we like to call them as partners. And truly, the spirit needs to take on a partnership level. Both partners in going through an innovation endeavor need to be flexible, to be able to manage pivot in terms of resourcing requirements, in terms of interventions, and the whole partnership concept doesn't just work at the working level. It needs to transcend to all the way to the highest level of sponsorship between the partner companies. And one case in point, the project DAF that I mentioned earlier, we had very good relationship with TCS. TCS was a committed partner with us, and we moved mountains to achieve the outcome that we desired.
Okay, thank you. Jeevan, being an advocate for digital transformation yourself and all, could you share with us what was the common theme of challenges that most organizations face and how in the digital journey, and how has TCS as a technology partner helped them through this? Could you share with us some of the examples of that?
Sure. I think we suddenly realized that the operating model of companies, traditional companies, need to change. The way you used to make decision needs to change. The processes that you have in line needs to completely change. Because why? Your customer today, the profile of a customer has completely changed. Everybody wanted instantaneous results, instantaneous outcome. And if you want instantaneous outcome, then the whole mechanism and the hierarchy structure that you currently have has to completely change. So we went and we spoke to a lot of our GLC customers and say, hey, we need you to change your operating model. We need you to start thinking faster and get into a flatter organization, such a way that you're able to meet your customers much more quicker. And then we suddenly realized that, okay, fine, they've changed the organization. Like Eugene just mentioned, it's the bigger challenge is not the technology, but it's the organization themselves. And we help many organizations change to become flatter and faster organization. But the second part we realized is, hey, the bigger challenge that we had during COVID is it a 2-week pandemic, or is it a 2-month pandemic, or is it a 2-year pandemic? So the initial hesitation was, what do we do now? Everyone was looking for leadership, and everyone was looking at different countries from leadership. So the first 2 weeks was a bit of a critical. But if you suddenly realize, hey, this is a great opportunity for me right now to change the way of working, and we become the pathfinder, then you've got the secret sauce. And then immediately, like what Eugene just mentioned and Shah just mentioned, it's completely putting the different way of working, and now we start a new way of working on a clean slate where we make outcome-based decision. We start looking at what is it from a customer lens perspective. You put customer as a priority right now, and then you see the difference happening immediately, instantaneously, and you suddenly see the entire ecosystem of within your organization also changes. The decision-making hierarchy also equally changes, because you want a decision almost immediately. So then you start seeing a lot of pivoting happening within the internal organization. And that's the challenge, and that's the secret sauce.
Interesting. And I wanted to leave the last question for Weng Lam, right? Because being a digital native organization as yourself, like for example Shopee, right? It's that people would have the assumption that you would not have the legacy as most other organizations would face. Is that a correct assumption? And could you share with us, if not, what were the challenges that you face from Shopee's point of view that you had to overcome being even a digital native organization as yourself?
Sure. I think for us, the good thing about being a digital organization, a native digital organization, is that we don't have such problems. And I think, as all of the people here have said, right, it really starts from the top. So if the top mandate is as such, then everyone really follows suit. So I think we are blessed from that perspective. But I think going back to the challenges being in this situation, obviously, as a platform like us, we actually have two parties that we actually need to resolve, right? We need to resolve the supply side, we need to resolve the demand side from a technology perspective. So if you think from our sellers' perspective, a lot of them traditionally have been offline. And the thing is, how do we bring them online, especially in light of this pandemic? So really, it was us also trying to help the country out. So we reached out to a lot of people and say, hey, here's the platform for you. We have the technology for you. You don't have to invest in the technology. But really, now it's a process of learning how to use the technology within your day-to-day operations. And so that's something that actually we have done, but we've actually really increased efforts over time. So we have this thing called Shopee Uni. So Shopee Uni really is us, I think, so as the name suggests, it's there for us to teach you how to use Shopee and how to teach you how to grow your business in an e-commerce landscape. Because we already have that, right? So that's one of the issues we have to resolve. I think the other part is on the buyer end, right? So it's two sides to the equation. So on the buyer end, really, as the platform grows and all of this, we see that there's increased demand, right? So obviously, rightfully said, people want it now. And the minute you cannot fulfill the now, it becomes an issue. So I'll give you an example. Especially with all of the sales that we have leading up to year end, we have 11/11, 12/12, and all coming. 1 hour of sales probably like in 12/12. We probably sold last year 600,000 items in 1 hour. So that's a very large volume. Now imagine that a transaction cannot happen because of, say, bank maintenance, right? That's a lot of things that don't happen, right? And so really to overcome that and really to resolve this issue, actually Shopee actually has released our own product called Shopee Pay. And that's really there to address that issue, to make sure that the buying experience at least becomes seamless. And we've really rolled that out, and I think we've really gotten good feedback from that. And really, I think for us now, it's how do we take that a bit further to make sure that the buyers also feel like they're part of the ecosystem as well.
Okay, and thank you all for sharing. And I think a common theme we hear across here is that we have to be agile, we have to be nimble, and that we need to be not just reactive to the problem, but be proactive towards it, right? And thank you for your insights. Next, I want to discuss a bit on the future focus, right? What is the future for your organization? Where do you see yourself in terms of this digital journey? Because as what we discussed even before coming into this panel was that it's a digital journey. It's something that spans not just across the next 6 months, but probably the next few years. And I wanted to start with Shah, was that what are the future focus right now for PETRONAS? Having already deployed, like what you mentioned, the agility, the methodology and all, what's your plan moving forward over at least the next 3 to 5 years?
Picking up, the few years of experience that we have, obviously the past few years have taught us a lot of change management, like Eugene mentioned, which was substantially a major challenge for us. It is not so much of a challenge for us right now. I mean, for the most part, buy-in is not an issue. Our people have started to see and embrace, the whole innovation and agile approach. They could see the value that some of the spin-off businesses that we have managed to create, for example, Settle and Rover. The question for us now is how do we capitalize this? How we strike, the proverbial iron while it's hot, right? And how can we make this into a sustainable and pervasive culture backed by an engine that will allow for more ideation rooted on strong customer centricity, rooted on bold thinking, rooted on agile, that we can have more sort of like 10x type of ideas that goes through the funnel that we can spin out new businesses beyond the core that we have today for PETRONAS. And that's the piece that we are focusing on right now, Duncan.
Okay. And Weng, just now you mentioned that some of the challenges that Shopee is facing is acquiring new buyers, combing through them to ensure that they are really ethical sellers and all, right? But so what are the plans for Shopee to actually grow customer acquisition and also convert the traffic to paying customers and also retaining some of these customers? What's the plan moving forward for Shopee on this?
Sure, maybe I'll talk about talk about that in three things that we are doing, right? So on the first part, actually, we are actually working with the government actually to help educate both the buyer and seller side. So actually, we have this thing called the Penjana MSME to help sellers, and also Penjana Shop Malaysia Online, and that's to help buyers, right? And that's really in works with the government to make sure that one, we obviously help the country to help get people back on their feet, right? I think that's very important for us because we also need to give back from that perspective. So that's what we are doing. And the second thing is also as people are coming online, I think one of the big things that we hear from the market is trust, right? How do you engage people to make sure that they still have trust in you in that transaction online? So that's something that we're working very hard on. And actually, just to give an example of that, one of the things actually we've just launched actually is this thing called $1 million brands discount. So a lot of people say, I only want to go offline to buy a thing because I can see the product. I can feel the product. But what we are doing is actually we're bringing this online, and we are giving the guarantees. And on top of that, as part of the launch, also we are subsidizing the price as well. So that we ensure that people who come online to buy have the surety that one, it's a real product. Number two, that it's cheap, not because it's a fake product, but it's because really we've put in the subsidies in place, right? And I think thirdly, also, as you said, how do we engage more people to come? So actually, as a company, we are moving in the direction, and we have all these games, right? So we are very big into shoppertainment. So that's something that we continue to develop as a company, as a technology platform. And more and more of these things will continue to happen for our platform. I can't reveal too much. Obviously, we have 9, 10, 11, 12 coming, so all the doubles are coming up. So stay tuned for more of that. Yeah.
Rest assured, I'm sure many of us on the panelists will be supporting that cause. Okay, then Eugene, I wanted to understand, you've shared a lot in terms of the plans that the Star has gone through in terms of moving a lot of consolidation, a lot of standardization go through. What are the plans for the Star moving forward? And what is the end game in mind that you have for the Star Media Group?
Okay, so the end game is really we want to build an ecosystem for the Star. So if you look at the Star right now, people just think about the Star as the newspaper. But we're more than just the newspaper. We have the physical print paper. We have Star Online. Then we have our OTT, the Dim Sum, right? And then we have 2 radio stations, right? We have 98 and then we have Surya. We also have Star Property. We have Car Sifu. We have Kuntum, which is the magazine that you may have read for when you were kids, and you need to improve your Bahasa Malaysia, right? And then we have iBilik, and then we have the events. So we actually have quite a number of lines of business. So at the end of the day, what we intend to do is we intend to unify all this into one huge big Star ecosystem. So what I mentioned earlier in terms of standardization of the systems, make sure that we can track the customers and all that is really the starting point. Because ultimately what we want to do is we want to make the experience on the Star as sticky as possible, so that if you're so that if you are reading something on the Star, and then if you go over to, let's say, Dim Sum, or you go over to Kuali, then the experience will be seamless, and then we can push the right things to you, right? So we want you to get stuck into our ecosystem. So that's really what we're trying to do, right? And we're making some small steps to actually do that. So that's really the end goal, right? So ultimately, if it's a customer of the Star, or if it's a reader or a subscriber, we want to know who you are so that we make our ecosystem as friendly as possible. But if you are an advertiser, then we want to ensure to you that because we know our audiences, and during MCO we've hit, I think our star.com.my hit almost 20 million readers, right? Because people had nothing else to do. I think the day we hit the highest, was the day where Muhyiddin announced the second. I think on March the 12th we hit quite high numbers, but then 2 weeks later he announced the extension, right? Then we hit even higher numbers, right? Right. So that's really what we want to do, right? To ensure that our ecosystem is as sticky, so we know who you are, and then so we also want to tell our advertisers that because we know our customers or our audiences the best, we ensure that when they go from one platform to another, we track them and we push the right things to them. So that's really what we're trying to do.
Okay, and I will actually give kudos to the staff for having that omni-channel experience, a very seamless omni-channel experience across all your platforms that you have. And then on that itself, right, Jeevan, how are an organization, a technology like TCS themselves, how are you gearing up to actually support most of the different organizations, seeing that not one size fits all? How is TCS as an organization gearing up for that and supporting our clients?
That's a very good question, Duncan. I think one thing we've realized in this digital world, there are a few tenets that you're going to start seeing very much. First, your customers will want mass personalization. They want to be treated as an individual. So mass personalization is something that's going to come very strong. Number two, they want exponential value. That is something very clearly they're going to call out. They want to really see exponential value. You must be really able to call out what is the value creation. Number four, they want an organization must be able to embrace risk. That means you must be pushing, like Shah says, fail fast, move it, push the risk element a bit more. Number three is number four, you're going to see an ecosystem play, like what Eugene just mentioned. You're going to see a lot of ecosystem play coming up in the next couple of years. And this is how we're helping our customers. Creating ecosystem, creating mass personalization solutions, pushing the envelope in a way we can get them to try something new, something they've never done before. Because digital disruption is all about pathfinders. We all need to be pathfinders in our own respective business. And only then you will find the new ways of living, new ways of doing business, and the new ways that you can add value to your customer. And I think all of us, in some shape or form, are finding ways, how do I add more value to my customer? How do I get much more personalized to my customer? How do I build trust with him that he continuously keep coming to me again and again and then again and again and doing business? And that will be the new mantra in the new world right now.
Mm-hmm. It's actually good, because this is what you mentioned just now is a very good segue to our next item that I want to talk about, which is on data. Because you mentioned that you want to have the value creation, and one of the new value creation in this digital sphere, it's in terms of data itself. How do you actually turn this data into insights, and how do you actually understand and adapt to the customer's changing demand, right? So first question I wanted to have for Weng Lam from Shopee's point of view is that, what is the plan of Shopee to actually build on the data that you actually gather from your customer? I understand that at times Shopee is already building probably our customers' persona, what are their tendency to buy, because I believe that they already have a lot of that on me right now. But what is the plan moving forward to actually convert a lot of these insights to more, like for example, paying customers that they will want to transact more with Shopee? How do you actually use that data?
Oh, sure. So, good question. Actually, we do this on a day-to-day basis. I think the benefit of having the data and being a data-centric organization is that actually it translates in the day-to-day language. So it doesn't matter from what team you are in. You would sort of hear the same languages being used, right? Like, what does the data say? Okay, what is happening now? What's growing? So these are all very common ground things. I think what we do is we have the data teams sit very closely to business. So instead of being a outsource center where we push in a request and a table comes in, it's something that it's a team that actually interacts very closely with the business. And just give you a few examples. We have a data team that constantly listens to what the trends are, what's upcoming. So even moving from the initial lockdown to our campaigns, actually, what was true was, give you an example of 4/4, right? So 4/4 was supposed to be a brands festival initially, but then the lockdown happened in March. And then when that happened, we saw a very big shift in what people wanted. So these were like very basic groceries, these were very basic personal goods, personal care stuff. And so very quickly, within a few days, actually, our whole company had to drop everything and pivot the company based on this information, because the demand has totally shifted. So based on that, then as we did that, we could see that one, obviously, that resounded very well with our customers. Then also we had very good feedback from that, right? And I think also recently there's been a very big durian craze as well, and we caught on to that, right? So actually we had a durian e-fiesta online as well, and I think people started saying, oh, I don't have to go to the offline place to actually get durian, I can actually get it now. So I think these are the things that we are doing to ensure that based on what we see over here, we can react very quickly, right? And then I think by virtue of having the teams look at it, listen to it, and talk about it in a way that resounds correctly, then we can make the right decisions to increase the conversion.
Okay. Eugene, I wanted to ask the question for the Star Media Group, for example, has already a few platforms, for example, Star Online, Dim Sum. These are already digital platforms that captures a lot of your customers' digital footprint, right? Could you share with us how Star Media Group are actually looking to capitalize on some of this data that you see from all these digital platforms itself?
Okay, so the answer is a little bit like what I explained earlier. So we capture what you actually read. And because we capture what you read, we know what you like reading. So if you are a person who likes to read about traveling, who likes to read about food, then we have figured out your persona after a while, right? So after a while, then you will realize that the kind of articles that we recommend to you will be certain kind of articles that is to your liking. So that's how we use data to make it sticky for you to be on our site, right? But at the same time, right, because we are capturing data, we can also go to our advertisers to say, hey, because we know our audiences best. So if you are like somebody who let's say you're a food and beverage company, right? So we know who your audiences are, so we can push the right ad if you advertise with us to the right person who is quite interested in that kind of product. So that's what we are trying to do. And if that person then moves from the Star Online, he goes to quali.com, right? Then we also know that it's the same person, right? And then we push the right things to that person, whether it's the same advert or even a recipe recommendation. So if that guy has been looking at certain kinds of articles, then we push the right things to the person, even on Quali. And then if that guy goes to Dim Sum, right, we've even got cooking programs, right? So we recommend the same things. So that's generally how data is at the center of our ecosystem now.
Yeah, and I can see that a lot of it right now, data is very intertwined to the entire ecosystem. And then I wanted to ask this question to Shah, right? It's that what's the future like looking at for PETRONAS in terms of the data adoption? Because we understand that, as you rightfully mentioned at the start, that yields are getting thinner, profit is getting thinner. How are you using data to actually help a more rooted vertical like oil and gas to actually grow in terms of that?
So we are a company that has been around for 46 years, pretty long, and obviously we have a lot of data. And just like any other big corporations, data tend to be everywhere, right? And that's a legacy. The way we approach this is, we start from the desired outcome. Jeevan mentioned this earlier as well. So what is the desired outcome? What is then the insights that you require to achieve the desired outcome and value? And then get the right data for it. So thinking about the desired outcome will inherently drive a good data management. Now, I'll take one example quickly, that's very popular, which is Settle right now. So Settle, when we started Settle, we did an extensive customer ethnography. We understood the major pain point for people that go into the stations is actually the time it takes to transact, right? And 80% of Malaysians, prefer to use cash. Because of the whole pre-authorization hold on credit card and all that. So, but they have to queue. And with queue, there's a lot of time. So nobody wakes up in the morning, hey, my tank is empty. I'm so looking forward to go into a PETRONAS station and fill up. So, when we do that, right, we solve their inherent pain point. It's come, fill, and go. The whole thing opened up to a lot more opportunities for us. We now have loyalty on that Settle. We have now a lot more data. In terms of loyalty and spending. We are now tying it to the back end, to the whole payment system, which we're going to get more data. So essentially, we have this digital one-on-one relationship with each segment of the customer. Now, the first example that I mentioned earlier, DAF, which is meant to kind of like compress the cost to serve, optimize cost to serve for the whole value chain. And PETRONAS is an integrated value chain in Malaysia, and that's our strength. So imagine this, combining DAF and Settle, we are able to compress cost to serve. We are able to liberate this value proposition. We now have a relationship with you, Duncan, since you have a Settle on your app. We can then segmentize you to the customer of one and pass that value proposition to you. So that's for us, it starts from an outcome base, getting people to see the value of that outcome, and data and insight will be a supplement to that.
And that ties very strongly to what Jeevan you mentioned just now on hyper-personalization for a lot of the customers, right? Then I wanted to take the point of view from a technology partner like TCS themselves. What is what would be your advice to organization who wants to infuse more data into their organization, moving from a data supplementing decision organization to a data-driven organization? What would your advice be for them?
I think data is I think it's a cliche right now. Data is the new currency. Everybody is looking at data for a lot of insights. Firstly, I think all CEOs of organizations should say it should be a data-driven decision. Whether it's an investment play, whether it's a solution play, or whether it's a behavioral play, it should be a data-driven decision making. So that should come from the CEO level. It's no more an IT job or an IT manager job. It's a CEO decision. All decisions should be data-driven, number one. Number two is, I think, what I call an ABC of digital disruption. Why I say ABC is important. First, A is we need to start looking into action-orientated programs. Outcome-based will be the key critical. It's no more doing nice thing. What is the outcome we want to achieve? Action-based projects that we need to start thinking about. Number two, B, betterment. What is the betterment for my customer? Whether it's my internal customer or to my customer outside. What is it betterment to Mother Earth? Sustainability. Because a lot of new profile of customers are going to start looking, what does this company stand for? What does the company stand for sustainability? So betterment not only for you, your customer, and also from sustainability angle. C, ABC, the C part is you always put customer first. Look at it from a customer lens perspective. The moment you look at it from customer, like what our friends from Shopee said, if you look at it from customer lens perspective, then all data-driven will basically come along and say, what is the customer? What do I anticipate my customer 1 years from now, 4 years from now, like what Shah said and Eugene said. This is how we should really start pivoting the organization. We can't sit in the fancy boardrooms and say, hey, this is how we believe it's going to be, this is what the trends are going to be. You really need to get into the ABC of digital disruption, and that would be the secret sauce for you to survive.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all panelists. Now I want to open the floor to a few questions from our live audience that we have. So the first question we have is from Jason. Post-pandemic, do you think that the trend to work remotely or work from home will continue since most facilities has been set up and the investment has been made? So probably I will push this question to Jeevan first. Since you are a technology partner for most of them.
I love that question. In TCS, globally, we've made a commitment by 2025. We will only have 25% of our employees come to office and giving 100% productivity. Only 25% of our employees will come to office by 2025. The rest will be working from home and making sure that we give you 100% productivity. And that's a very bold statement that we're taking and a bold move that we're taking. Because this is the new, because we realize, hey, with this pandemic, our productivity is increased from a lot of our teams. Our collaboration is increased with a lot of teams. The outcome, the customer's experience is also far greater than what they used to have meetings. And the physical commute by a lot of for employees moving to offices have also been completely removed. So we believe by 2025, we've taken a bold stand to say only 25% of 450,000 employees that we have today will only go to office.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Question to Shah. Oh, this directly to you. How did PETRONAS pivot towards an agile culture and process, taking into consideration the massive organization change? Example here, it's flattening the organization structure, information transparency, and faster budgeting decision cycle. And this question is from Eugene.
Thank you. I think it's a very good question, right? And I think throughout the years that we did it, we had to kind of like shift between, if I imagine it like a pendulum. On one side, it's centrally driven, it's top down in terms of vision. We need to be agile, we need to adopt more innovative approach. And on the right side, it's more around going back to the business, getting them to drive it. And we constantly shift between the two. There are phases that we kind of like need to move to the left where it needs to be driven. There's no choice, we have to do it. And one good example that I would like to mention is, and I'm thinking about that information transparency in that question, is when we went remote working, using collaboration tools, not a problem. But the management consciously shifted from the use of meetings and PowerPoints to present insights and information. So we democratized a business intelligence tool. That's another word for dashboard. DIY dashboard. Power BI. That's a few out there. People have to use this, and when people start to adopt it, they see the value of it. Hey, I don't have to have meetings. The dashboard is always near real time. For as long as I have the database, which I do keep it, people can access and insights can be gathered and decisions can be made. There are times that once the parts of the organization are ready, we have to move towards more to the right. And that's more to get people to drive it in a sustainable manner. There's no other way for the organization to deliver some of this undertaking other than by the people on the ground, by the people in the business, simply because the investment is made in these subsidiaries and the value is realized down there. So ownership at that level is very crucial.
Okay. And I think this ties very strongly to one of the points, Jeevan, you mentioned that not just when the remote workforce is there, you have to ensure that it's secure and information that's passing in and out of even employees' laptop themselves has to be secured, right? Yeah. So our next question, what would you suggest as a starting point for traditional business such as a contractor to transform digitally? And this question is from Patricia. So maybe this ties a bit to Eugene. Maybe you can help answer this, tying a bit to where the start transform and what should the first steps be for some organization who are just only starting on their digital journey?
Okay, so I think this is a tough question, right? And you can tell I'm stalling because I'm trying to figure out how to answer this. Okay, so I've probably eaten up like 30 seconds already, right? So contractor, okay, so I'm not a contractor, but what I would say is, I'll probably answer this in two ways. If you're specifically if you're a contractor, I think what you need to do is, maybe the easiest way for you to do is to tie yourself up with an online presence outside. For example, recommend.my or that advertises services, home services, and you can use them as a starting point. So what that allows you to do is you then don't need to invest so much. You literally use someone. So you find like a third party that can help be an extension of yourself, right? And then you grow with that third party. I'm not just saying recommend that. There's a few out there, right? So you can use that as a starting point to jump off. And then once I think you have gotten enough, because that will give you access to allow people to find who you are, and then once you've built up a good loyal following, then maybe you can internally start developing simple online presence. So that will be my recommendation, right? So rather than quickly building your own website and spending tons of Facebook advertisement and things like that, maybe start small, work with a partner to extend your reach, and then once you build up enough sustainable reach, then you can do your own internal marketing. That's
okay. Probably an idea to Shopee is that probably you can start extending it to services also.
We actually do have it.
Okay. Next question. How does a company balance the trade-off between harnessing data analytics and safeguarding data governance? And this question is from Alan. And so I wanted to maybe pose this question to Weng Lam in the sense that Shopee has probably been a platform that has gathering so much data and so much information. How do you actually safeguard this, and how do you balance between probably some parts of data ethics and data trust and data governance in safeguarding the data of your customers?
Sure. I probably won't answer this on the technology front because obviously there are many technology solutions to this. But I think at the end of the day, in times like this when people need access to data, I think number one is I think probably in the context of Shopee, where Shopee is probably a younger organization, people who have just come out from college who don't really know the consequence of this. I think one is the education to the team is very important, right? I think number two, I think they need to understand. So what we do in the company is we treat people like adults. So while they're younger, we treat them like adults. So I think we make them understand what the consequences are should this happen, right? And I think when people start to feel the burden of responsibility, I think their mindset changes. right? So I think that is something that we continue to echo in the company. In fact, I think just yesterday I was just talking about this to my team as well. So on one hand, we always like to say that, look, this is the data provided for you to make all those decisions, but please always note that this is something that you don't discuss. This is something that you always keep it within the team, right? And then be professional about it. And I think we see that, it's like children, right? The minute you talk to them a little bit like an adult, they start to behave differently as well. I think that's probably something that a company can do to do that. But obviously, some bigger numbers and more impactful stuff, those are the things that are probably kept at a smaller circle.
Okay, thank you. And as we wrap up our session today, thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, our panelists, for sharing all your insights. And that I hope it has been helpful to our live audience today. And that thank you also to the Star Media Group for actually hosting us today. Take care and stay safe, everyone.